Hello and welcome to Distraction, episode 17. This is the podcast where I distract you with the things that have been distracting me in and out of quarantine, whether that be movies, TV shows, books or music. This week I've actually put a fair bit of research into, I do a little bit of research every week, but this week I'm going to cover two main topics and maybe do a few extra recommendations towards the end of the podcast. But if you didn't know by the title or me posting online, I want to talk about Hamilton, which is the new... not new. It's a musical Broadway. It's a Broadway musical that's been on Broadway for flip knows how long, and it's recently been added to Disney Plus. And I would like to talk about how that is blurring the lines between class and the entertainment that we traditionally view in our classes. And I'll go through a bit of that. I've been reading my old sociology textbook, so that should be quite fun. And then I'd also like to talk about, this week I watched a mukbang from the Sidemen. I'm not sure how many of my viewers watch Sidemen, probably a fair bit, so you might have seen it. And one of the questions that they talked about was, who is the greatest artist in our lifetime? So it is a very broad question. And they decided it was Kanye West. And then when I brought it up with some of my friends on PSN, they also suggested that it could be Kanye West. And I was really, really set aback because... as much as I started listening to hip-hop, I actually only really know the classics of Kanye, and also know that he's an absolute arsehole of a person, but I didn't really know the ins and outs, so I'm going to give a little history on him and discuss whether he's actually the greatest artist of all time. But I'll start at the beginning, where I always start. One recommendation this week is Hamilton, which may be obvious. So Hamilton, again, is a Broadway musical, traditionally in New York, but I think some theatres in London as well have shown it. And it's, I'm going to say traditionally a lot. Traditionally, it's more for rich people than New York because tickets are very, very expensive. And what I'm going to, so I'd like to talk about how Hamilton being added to Netflix is like. So in sociology, I talk about this quite openly and just without really referencing anything before, because I've done so many years of sociology and lots of my friends were with me when we did sociology. So when I say things like culture capital, and like just talk about like, most people obviously have a basic understanding of sociology, but sometimes I do say things that when I've talked to some of my friends back at home, they sometimes look at me a bit like, you say it as if that's general knowledge, and maybe it's not. So I'm going to go through how the theatre experience used to be a predominantly upper-class activity, and now that it's been added to and I've been added to Disney Plus, it's now available for a much wider audience instead of just the rich people of New York or London, and how this can have an actual big impact, but also because... if you've been anywhere on the internet recently, you've seen that the arts is really, really struggling through the lockdown, and they wanted like 50 million from the government, and that's for the music sector, the comedy sector, the theatre sector, and they rely a lot on ticket sales and things like that. So they were really urging for government help and also public donations. But, and maybe this makes me a bad person, I have a few friends who do theatre sort of stuff, but for an activity and a culture that is normally shut off to the wider public, and they're now, I know they're primarily asking for help from the government, but now that they're actually asking the public for donations and to like help, sorry, that was my phone, I think it's a bit cheeky, and I understand it's really important, don't get me wrong, I think the arts is very important, I think it should have funding and we should help, but there's a difference between things like cinema, which is very widely available to a massive audience. It's wildly, I know obviously it is easier for some than others, basically white men, to get into and to help and get your name out there, especially with the introduction of like YouTube and smartphones and cameras. It's easier than ever to create a video and put it out there, create a film, put it out there, and be seen by millions and millions of people. And see, there's a difference between that and the theatre, which, like I said, is more of an upper-class experience. It's very expensive to go to. So when we're talking about putting some more funding in or raising money for, I'd be more willing to raise money for, say, music venues that I can frequent quite cheaply and have fantastic evenings, or cinemas where I can go and see amazing films from blockbusters right down to indie films, especially in places like Tyneside, in Newcastle, rather than the theatre, which I do love, and I'd love to have seen Hamilton live. But yeah, there was just something about it for me that just felt a bit odd. But I'm gonna actually start at the beginning. Sorry, that's my glass of juice. I'm actually gonna start at the beginning with my thoughts on Hamilton. Because this isn't just me bitching about Hamilton. I think Hamilton is a fantastic step in the right direction for showing a wider audience shows that they may never have seen. And this can also be seen on National Theatre on YouTube, which is like England's national theatre, and they've been putting out free plays every single week, and it gets taken down after a week, so you can only watch it for that time. I did recommend it in one of my earlier podcasts, but they're still going out on YouTube. Again, I'll link it below. So if you are interested in that sort of thing, they actually are available on YouTube. But to get into Hamilton, I would honestly give it 5 out of 5 stars. Obviously, it's different to any other musical I've ever seen with the hip hop and just the way that the story is conversed. I really, really like Aaron Burr because he gives exposition, obviously, to the whole story, and there's lots of things where it's really difficult. There's lots of films that really struggle with exposition. For example, Frozen 2, which was going to be one of my recommendations this week, because I actually watched it because that also came out on Disney Plus the same day. I'd say 90% of that film is exposition, and if you didn't, just to be completely clear, exposition is like advancing the story. So, for an example, in Hamilton, it would be like, this is Alexander Hamilton, this is who he is, this is his age, this is his background, this is where he's going, this is what happened in the story. That's exposition. Unless I'm completely wrong, then everyone can laugh at me, but that's what I'm pretty sure it is. I should really not doubt myself, because I'm like, that is exposition. And Aaron Burr gives it so beautifully in Hamilton that you don't even realise he's doing it. Obviously, it's all in song, and lots of the songs are absolutely fantastic for when they do have fights and arguments, and in the court scene, I absolutely love that. And like, it goes so quickly. 2 hours and 40 minutes it is, and it was at the interlude. I've got intermission. Before you even know it, it was gone so quick. Obviously, I have actually listened to soundtrack a fair bit. One of my friends in foundation year put it on a playlist for me, and ever since then I have listened to it and I've absolutely loved it. But it was so different watching it on the screen. I mean, I might be completely dumb. I did think there'd be a few more sets. I didn't realise it was all like that, because I've never ever seen a clip. I've only ever listened to the soundtrack. Much funnier than I realised it was, because obviously in the soundtrack they could make jokes and say things, but then it does get a bit dulled down after a while if you're sort of singing it to yourself, because you're just sort of like hitting the lines and hitting the notes, whereas when you're actually watching it, and the facial expressions especially shows how funny of a show it is. I think it's absolutely amazing. I recommend you use the theatre rules. They say it at the beginning, because obviously it's filmed in front of a live audience. But I didn't have my phone. I didn't pause it. I had like a drink and I had some snacks. But yeah, apart from that, like, I didn't pause it. I didn't leave the room. Didn't look at my phone. Didn't have anything. It was like I was at the theatre, and it was magical. If that's not an overplayed term. But yeah, I actually really, really loved it. So you should honestly go and watch it. This spinning stage mechanic, I thought that was fantastic, and I've seen like a few musical artists use that, like Take That used it on one of their most recent tours that I went on. But the way they used it in the story, obviously they had to show big areas of space, and like the 1 to 10, like not jousting, what's it called when they get two guns, and I can't remember the word. I always have brain farts whenever I do this, but like those particular scenes of it, I absolutely loved. And then, yeah, I actually made notes during it, because I was like, I've got Jaws written on the back. I was actually loving it so much. I was like, I don't want to miss anything out. So I did actually have a pen and paper as well, and I was writing some notes. The last thing I wrote, it was allowing the working class to watch higher class entertainment because it needs the money. Is that a different motive to why it was put on Disney Plus? So I wanted to put a brief I wanted to talk about a brief introduction of class in society. This is the most basic that you'll get. It's right at the beginning of my textbook. It just outlines class and society. But I am aware that lots and lots of my friends have done sociology with me, but I'm aware that lots never have. Like, they've never done it in school. And until I did sociology, we never talked about class and gender and identity. So there's several ways to define class, and we can look at groups who share similar economic situations or sometimes similar social situations. But class is much more than this, and it's very important. I don't think we realise. Some people have tried to say that class isn't important anymore. We don't really need to talk about it, but I think class is more important now than ever. And there are certain subclasses that have arose, and there's also subclasses that have their own. Every subclass, sorry, has their own norms and values. Which, if you ever did any social sciences, you'll know. But that basically just means rules, norms and values in their identities and their lifestyles. So each one is very, very different. And it really has an impact on how you grow up, because obviously everyone will know working class and upper class. Like, you know, if you're born into one of them, you're gonna have a very different livelihood. But just to be like completely, what's the word, transparent, I'm going to go through exactly what I mean by the classes, because I don't like it when I listen to podcasts that will talk about something and sort of not outline like their distinction of things. They'll just say, oh well, we all know about this, but like there's some things that people can have different opinions on. Maybe this isn't one of those things, but I just want to outline it. So the upper class is those traditionally most inherited wealth, often in the form of land. And a clever aspect of this class is their invisibility, because they operate something known as social closure. And social closure basically means that their education, their leisure time, their daily lives are more distant than the general population. They go to special clubs, they have activities within their own class in areas where the general population isn't allowed. And it's so easy to have examples of this. Think of lords on their private land hunting, having these big banquets. The royal family, obviously, they're probably upper than higher class, but you understand what I mean when I talk about that they have social closure. I would really struggle to get into it, but this has changed recently. Obviously, for the last few hundred years, I would have no chance of ever breaking this. But the discussion comes in the form of the internet and also in the form of celebrity, because you learn about people like David Beckham, who now has as much, if not more, money than some people in these upper classes. But would you call him upper class? Would you call him working class? Because he's worked all his life to get this money. But he now goes to these banquets. He might hunt. He may do things like this. So that's where class can now come into question, which is why some people say, is it as important? Because the rise of celebrity has sort of blurred the lines between this. But that's the upper class. The middle class, which is now seen as a majority, and traditionally working in professional and managerial roles, and often credited as having like university degrees. That's people, like adults seen in the middle class. That's what they're seen to have had. It's seen as like a meritocracy. Obviously, people work their way up. You could be born into the working class. It's much easier to get into the middle class as long as you work hard. And obviously, we all know meritocracy is bullshit. And if you don't think it is, I've got some bad news for you. But yeah, so they work their way up, having degrees. But obviously, the distinction is now that there could be an upper middle class and a lower middle class, with people starting their own businesses. And again, instead of being born into that class, they were working their way up, or they would be seen as middle class, but they own their own business, which could be. So in the working class, we're talking about traditionally it's hard working, it's manual labour, but you see plumbers and things that make more money than managerial roles. So are they now in the middle class? They make more money, but they do a manual job, and if we were going off a set list, that would actually make them working class. So that's a bit where the distinction goes. But if we're talking working class, like I said, we'd see it as majority of the population, especially up north. I guess I did say middle class was a majority of the population, but I think middle class is a majority of the population now would actually fit that bracket. But the higher ups definitely see the population more as a working class population, even though it is dwindling, because it was traditionally made up of trade work and manual labour. But with the erosion of factories and the manufacturing sector, lots of these communities have disappeared. So we could see a decrease in the working class population. But most people like you or I, who's probably watching this, would probably class yourselves as working class. I don't have many friends who would honestly put their hand up and be like, I'm middle class. A few of them might be, but There you go. Especially ones with pillars outside the houses. We all know who that is. Matty. um, and finally, there's the controversial underclass that I do think exists. And it's a very horrible term, and I think it's used to put down a subset of people. But the underclass, if you didn't know, is something that exists through discrimination in the upper classes, which I don't think anyone would self-identify as. It's people you would traditionally call benefit scroungers, people like that, people who were too lazy, probably live in council housing, like the bottom of society that they'd be seen as. But this is traditionally more by the upper classes. They probably see themselves as working class. And I think it exists, but I don't. I think. Let me get this straight. I don't think there are that many people that are lazy and just want to live on benefits. I do not believe that's true. I think it's a difference of opportunity, but I do think the distinction of the underclass is there because it's been created by people at the top, and technically there are people. I don't know. It's a sticky one, but I do think it exists. But the reason I outline this is because society is full of capital, culture capital, which is, I know, I'm sorry if this is so obvious to everyone, but I just wanted everyone to be on the same page for when I make my final point. So it's full of capital. You have culture capital, which is the knowledge, skills, education, overall advantages that you have in life. Social capital, quite easy, the people you know, the circle. So obviously in upper classes, this social capital is very important because it will get you in CEO jobs. It will get your daughter or son married to another rich family. And then obviously you have economic capital, which it's probably the biggest. What's the word? What am I thinking of? I'm talking very quickly, but I'm quite dumb. That's the biggest advantage in life, to have economic capital, because the more money you have, the easier your life is. That might be controversial, but it's true. And the point of this is that traditionally upper class, like I said, have had culture capital. They do activities like going to the theatre, seeing opera, going hunting, having banquets with other rich people. And now that Hamilton has been added to Disney Plus, and this may open the door for more theatre productions to be shown to a much wider audience, they're losing their culture capital because it's now so available to the wider public. They can't hold on to it anymore. And I think this has been happening ever since streaming services arrived, where culture capital is now becoming a blur when everyone has more or less access to everything. And that is what I love about Hamilton being on Disney Plus. I don't know if I accidentally said that up as if it's a negative thing, but I think it's absolutely fantastic that Hamilton's now on Disney Plus, available for everyone to watch, available for everyone to see the theatre, to see how cool it is, to see that it's, you don't just have to watch a blockbuster Marvel film to be entertained, especially if you're a younger person who might now be so indoctrinated that that is entertainment. It's celebrities, it's Marvel films, it's watered down TV shows, and like Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty's good, but like I do think that theatre does have a certain aspect of class, an aspect of matureness, and it conveys stories in such a way. And also with Hamilton, I may be the biggest fucking moron, but obviously it's a true story. I didn't know that, and that's the point of it, is because no one really knew what Hamilton. Spoilers, but you've probably, I don't know, spoilers if you haven't seen it. But obviously at the end they sort of say that it was his wife that got all of his like writings and made them so he would be remembered for what he did. And obviously, it's not. I don't think it's dumb that I didn't know who he was, because I don't know anything really. I barely know that much about my own English history, so I'm not going to go and learn American history and where they came from, before I've learnt my own. But it was really, really interesting to now have more of a knowledge on that. And there's videos on YouTube which I've watched since, like 101 facts about the American Civil War, the American legislation, whatever it was. But I think it was just a really fucking cool. Is it a play? Theatre production. I think the music is the best music in any production I've ever seen, maybe apart from some Pantos. But Lin-Manuel is fantastic. He's absolutely amazing. I'm in awe of him. He's so funny, he's so talented. And yeah, I think this is a very. It's an easy watch, even though it's so long. And like some people might be like, I've never really watched theatre before. It's a really easy watch, and it's a fantastic step into that world, because it's just so welcoming. I don't know, and the music isn't like opera, or it's not just like what is it, like Black Swan. Is that the name of the film or the name of the play? I don't know. But like the music in that, it's very, very like that is ballet. Like that to me, that's still like that's still seen as an upper class activity. Whereas Hamilton, I feel like, is opening the door to everyone, and I think that's fantastic. I think everyone should have the same opportunities. Everyone should have the same entertainment. It shouldn't be I can afford this and I can afford this. I shouldn't have to go and watch. I mean, as much as I enjoy it, I shouldn't have to go and watch Iron Man because I can't afford to go and watch Hamilton, if that makes sense. But yeah, sorry if that was a massive rant. Is that 20 minutes? Sorry about that. If you're here for Kanye, I really hope that you sat through that one. Sorry. I didn't know I could go on that long, but it really means a lot to me. Even as someone who hasn't been a massive fan of Hamilton for that long, I'm glad it's on Disney Plus. That's my point. So, artists of our generation. Like I said, I was watching a Sidemen video where they were talking about the artist of a like the best artist, and they specifically specified that it isn't just a singer. It is someone who directs, produces, like yeah, like everything. Like it's everything. It's not just goes out and sings a song and is on #1 Billboard. Because then we'd say Ed Sheeran is the best fucking artist of our time. And to be fair, I was actually having this discussion with people in my PSN. I'll shout them out. It was Ethan, Harry, and Johnny, if I'm not wrong. And we were talking about who is the greatest artist. And we were sort of stuck between... I can't exactly remember who we said, but we were talking about, like, does it come down to a distinction of, like, Kanye West, he produces, he's a director, fashion designer, rapper, or is it, like, successful? Because if you look at the most if you look at the most successful albums, it's never really the people I'd say were the best musicians or producers. It's people like Ed Sheeran, like James Arthur has 1 billion views on one of his songs on Spotify, but Kanye West doesn't. So it is things like that. It's like, how do you define it? Like I said in the Simon video, they said it is Kanye West, and then some of my friends agreed with that. They could see why that could be the case. And after some research, I found out that he has impacted hip hop more than any other artist ever, and he is the greatest rapper. But is he the greatest ever artist? He was a producer at first to get his name out there, and he produced people like Jay-Z and so many others. And yeah, these are just things I didn't know. So I'm actually going to do a quick, brief history of Kanye, if you're like me and haven't really listened to him, or didn't know the power of the impact of his albums. So until he dropped College Dropout, which is his first album that would change the course of music, the way he worked the beats and samples was revolutionary at the time. And I just want to also put a bit disclaimer when I'm talking about like sampling music and beats and rapping and the impact side. I don't know that much about music. I have friends that are really into music. I have friends that have studied music. So I'm just reading what I've found out. I've watched YouTube videos and read a few articles, so this is what I found out. But if it's wrong, I apologise. I don't think it's wrong, but maybe I'm not. I might say something wrong because I'm not 100%. But this is what I found out and I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to share it with you. So the way that he worked with beats and sampling music was revolutionary at the time, and this became a staple of his music, and later became its own subgenre of music called chipmunk soul. With like how he samples music and the different types of music and things like that, apparently. So a year later, he released his second album, attempted something new, sampling jazz and live orchestra, which I fucking love. I love a live orchestra on any track, whether it's hip-hop or pop. Live orchestra, yeah. He was integrating this music, was new at the time, and once again... so obviously, before he revolutionised beats and sampling in music and hip-hop, and then it became... popularised and everyone started doing it, and then again when he started doing jazz and live orchestra, this again popularised and everyone started doing it. But he earned his second Grammy. I forgot to say he earned a Grammy for the first one as well. Graduation, his third album, it was inspired by techno and indie rock, and I really like this one. It's each track having synthesizers and electronic type beats, unheard of until then once again. And then he threw a few old style school songs towards the end of the album for the old style fans, and this mix gave him an audience of like techno lovers, old style hip hop fans, electronic like fans, and some say Graduation gave birth to rap's first ever rock star. They say that Kanye West is the first ever rock star. coming from hip hop. And then his mother passed away 2 months after this album was released, and he was broken up with. And that's very important knowledge to know for his fourth album, because this was a very, very different album to what he'd done before. The electronic type beats and auto tune for his voice was brand new to him, especially the auto tune in this album. And it was all about loss and heartbreak and emotion. And Kanye made it okay to sing on hip hop albums. Up until now, it had been obviously rap, and especially towards the beginning, it was gangster rap. So if you weren't in a gang and didn't sell drugs, you weren't really going to get out there. But he made it okay to sing about loss and heartbreak. He made it okay to sing on your album. This is his fourth album, and this paved the way for massive artists now like Post Malone and Drake. And famously, he said that famously said there are some rap artists, that are on their seventh album. He famously said, sorry, I completely fucked that up. He famously said that there's some rap artists that are now on their seventh album, and they still use like the same beats, they still sing about the same things, and it's all the same stuff. And he said that real people grow, so he is going to grow, and his music's going to grow, and it's going to go in different directions, which is completely true. Every album he takes a new direction and popularizes whatever the fuck he does, because he does seem to be a fantastic producer and rapper, which I think is a fantastic statement that people are real, people grow, so of course the music's going to grow. If people are still rapping to the same beat about the same stuff in the seventh album of the first, how real are they? His fifth album was seen as the pinnacle, and I think this is... Oh, what's the name? It's like the... I don't know. It's like the best and worst or something. Should I have a quick look on Spotify? Sorry for this dead air, but it'll take me 2 seconds. What's it called? My Beautiful, Dark and Twisted Fate, that one. That's his fifth album, and that's seen as the pinnacle name, the best album of 2010, and some people have argued the best album of all time, because after many public breakouts and the iconic moment with Taylor Swift where he was an arsehole, the concept of the album does reflect this, because it reflects how fame can change your life. Yeah, and like I was trying to think how fame changed your life, and how the songs are produced themselves. And how the songs are produced themselves also made it an instant classic. So not only what it was about, but also how they were produced. Like the songs were just fantastic, especially was it Runaways that on that album? Fucking amazing song. Again, I haven't just started listening to most of it quite recently, but we all know classic when we hear it. And that's with his lyrics and production combining all his old sounds into one album, people have said. And then after that, he made a joint album with Jay-Z, and he made some more iconic modern-day hip-hop anthems. And at almost every album, people said he had changed, and the sound had changed, and he wasn't the same. But people have said that this is actually the most true on his album Yeezus, which is an experimental album, which is when he actually did change. This is the album that I'm probably most familiar with. I've probably heard it most, maybe because it came out I think in 2013 when I was in mid-secondary school, and like teenage boys were sort of like, oh yeah, hip-hop Kanye West, and like I just heard it all the fucking time when I've gone back and listened to it. And we all got our iPods around then, didn't we? So... And he tried to not write hooks. This is an interview I watched. He tried to not write hooks or radio hits. He just wasn't interested in that line, like the way Ed Sheeran would write a radio hit that will be played billions of fucking times across the world. He wasn't interested in that. He tried to write new things and was praised because of it. And it opened up the field to him and so many other artists because of his unorthodox techniques. He created a field of make what you want to make and the audience will come. And his album Life of Pablo was the first ever album to go platinum on a digital only release, which I think is absolutely amazing. Amazing, interesting, looking at where we're going within like the spectrum of entertainment. I think it's really, really cool. And he even tweaked the album weeks after its release, which I think is astonishing, that he released it and then for weeks after he was still changing lyrics and beats, and even reconfigured a whole even reconfigured a whole song, if I'm not wrong. And like I said, at the time he started rapping, it was mainly gangster rap. But by the time his career I'd still say his career is quite at its height. He's not going anywhere, but he's changed the game forever with more light-hearted songs, with unorthodox approaches, and I can see how he is an amazing artist, and maybe a good artist of our generation. I forgot to stipulate that as well. It had to be of like our generation, so they had to have had big music from '99 onwards, so that does maybe rule out lots of traditional artists, so I'm not just ignoring all them, but I can see how he could be one of the greatest musical artists. Because at every opportunity he created masterpieces that would change the face of hip-hop and inspire some of the biggest rap artists of our generation, including my favourite, Childish Gambino. So I have to thank him for that. But I did watch this on a YouTube video. Ooh, sorry for that sound. I watched this in a YouTube video where the guy obviously was a massive fan of Kanye West and concluded he was the best rap artist of all time. But I think it's very, very... You have to point out that he is an arsehole. I don't like the guy. There's so many issues with him. Some of the things he said. There's articles about him saying that slavery was a choice. There's articles about him being pro-life. I always get those mixed up, but I know that he thinks abortions are wrong. He's very infatuated with God. He praised Trump for finally having a president that allows God into the seat as well. And I think religion and politics should be fairly separate. I just don't think they fit together very well. And obviously he's now running for president, but you can see that him running for president is just an attempt to split the vote. Because Trump voters are going to go and vote Trump, but those who would vote Biden or others would now vote for Kanye as a joke, and it is splitting the vote, which gives Trump the advantage. And in this same video, the guy did say that apparently there's reports that he was trying to get close to Trump because Kim Kardashian's friend was in prison, so they wanted to get close to the man in political power to get them out of prison. Or it is also always good to be best friends with the man who is the most powerful man in the world. So I could see why he might fake become friends with the president. But I think the person who made this video and tried to say that he's not really friends with Trump might have a bit of a rose-tinted view on things. And I think he probably is a supporter of Trump from some of the things he said, lots of things he's done. Again, I think he's a strange man. I definitely wouldn't call him person of the fucking generation, because I think he's not a very good person. But then that puts us into the question of, can you separate art from the artist, which has been a very, very long debate, something we've talked about in our lectures, because it's obviously with directors and actors that come out having done certain things. Can you distinguish their work from their art? And that's a very important question that I don't think I'll be able to answer on this podcast, and it has plagued me. It's the same reason, can we still listen to Michael Jackson songs? Can you still watch Kevin Spacey movies? It's things like that it's a very, very, I don't know, controversial. And I don't know, can I enjoy Kanye's music and name him the greatest artist of all time, not taking into account that I think he's actually pretty trash of a human being? Maybe that's all the front. Maybe I don't know him well enough. I might get some angrily texting me saying that's a very big thing to say, and I could be totally wrong. But from what I've seen, I wouldn't call him person of the generation, so I don't know if I'd call him artist of the generation. But you'd have to be blind to not be able to see the impact that he has had on the music industry, which leads me to believe he could be the greatest artist that we've seen in modern times. Artist being producer, rapper, director, fashion designer, everything. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or give me a message, because you're all probably my friends watching this. Give me a message, see what you think if you did get this far. Tell me if you liked Hamilton or preferred the Kanye West speak. Sorry I went on for 20 minutes. I do have Instagram, which is @GoPrandle or @GoPrandle on film. I also have Letterbxd, where I do little reviews for the films I watched, which is @GoPrandleSucks. I don't really have anything else to plug, but please come back next week. I love doing these podcasts. Sorry this one came out a little bit late, but I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and see you next week.